So good evening. My name is Brian Williams, and in addition to being a faculty member in the College of Education and Human Development, I serve as the director of the Alonzo A. Krim Center for Urban Educational Excellence here at Georgia State University. And tonight it is my honor and privilege to welcome you to the 29th annual Benjamin E. Mays Lecture. I've been giving the welcome at Mays Lecture for about 7 years now, and I take this job very seriously. I, like many of you, understand the importance, the vital importance of a warm welcome. And like me, many of you were charged with the responsibility of welcoming guests at your family's birthday parties, New Year's celebrations, family cookouts. There was a procedure for doing this when somebody arrived at the door, and it went something like this. The doorbell would ring, and you rush to the door because you want to open the door promptly because it's rude to keep guests waiting. If you don't know the people, you greet them with a warm smile and a handshake. You introduce yourself, you ask their names. If you know them, you greet them with a warm smile, offer your hand for a handshake, and then prepare yourself for the volley of hugs and kisses and chin pinches that are to follow. Regardless, after you greet them, you say, "Welcome to our home," or you say, "Come in." And then, and this is the very important part, you say, "The food is in the kitchen," right? Or you say, "The food is in the dining room," or "The food is on the back porch." Whatever the occasion, the welcome always included directions for where the food was, because if you were the host, you were always expected to feed your visitors, and if you were the visitor, you always expected to be fed, right? So with that in mind, I say with a smile, welcome to Georgia State University. Welcome to the College of Education and Human Development. Welcome to the 29th annual Benjamin E. Mays Lecture. Many of you I know personally, others I know who you belong to, right? You are teachers and scholars, parents and activists, students and leaders. You're life changers and path makers, visionaries and trailblazers. You are Dr. King's beloved community. You are Dr. Krim's community of believers. And some of you are Dr. Hilliard's warriors. Regardless, I hope that you know that we invited Dr. Leslie Fenwick here tonight and created this amazing space for you for one purpose alone, so that you will be fed. So welcome to the Mays Lecture. Before I take my seat, I want to thank a few people who made tonight possible. I'm going to start with one of our very honored guests. In some ways, the woman that made all of this possible. I want to start by thanking Dr. Joyce King. He waved, Joyce, let them know who you are, let them see you. So Joyce is the Benjamin E. Mays Endowed Chair for Urban Teaching, Learning, and Leadership, and it was 28 years ago when our first Benjamin E. Mays Chair, Dr. Alonzo Krim, launched this wonderful lecture. And Joyce has been about the business of maintaining that legacy as our Mays Chair. So thank you for everything you do, Joyce. All right. I want to thank the Dean of the College of Education and Human Development, Dr. Paul Alberto. Where is Paul? There he is back there. Paul, can you wave? Thank you. So Paul, we want to thank you for continuing to be a supporter and an advocate for urban education and for this lecture in particular. This is a valuable part of our community, and you make it happen every year. So thank you very much. I want to thank our Associate Dean for School, Community, and International Partnerships, Dr. Gwen Benson. Gwen, will you wave so people can see you? So Gwen, we want to thank you for being one of the major powers behind our work that we do every single day in support of our children in our schools and our communities. It wouldn't happen without you. So thank you so much. I want to thank Angela Turk, Clara Miller, and Nicola Allen. They are buzzing around here somewhere. There they are back over in the corner. There's our wonderful communications team. So all those wonderful emails and those social media posts and anything you see that gives you information about the Mays Lectures because of Angela and her team, and we want to say thank you to them. They'll be live tweeting tonight, hashtag Mays Lecture 2018, so make sure you follow. I want to thank these folks, the Crim Center staff, the wonderful team that works in the Crim Center every single day. Special thanks to Dana Salter, Shayla Philpott, Gayla Tillman, and Daniel Copeland for contributing to this night. And we can applaud them because they are amazing people. And also Amy Stamen and the Student Center staff for allowing us to have this wonderful space, and Matt Munson for videography tonight, Matt Munson and Cedal for videography tonight. So we are videotaping tonight, and it will be made available at a later date, so you can kind of share it with your friends that can't be here tonight. Finally, I want to thank Dr. Leslie Fenwick. Thank you for taking the time to travel back to the city of Atlanta to share your ideas regarding excellence in urban education. Dr. Fenwick, we're living in very challenging times. These are tough times. The time between last year's lecture and today, it's been rough. It's been rough. I mean, now we have had some bright spots, right? I mean, after all, have y'all seen Black Panther? No. So, right? All right. But, you know, Dr. Fenwick, I have no doubt that you will offer us another bright spot tonight. And so we want to thank you for offering us a better vision for our children here in Atlanta and abroad. So thank you once again for being here. And of course, I want to thank you for taking the time to come out and learn and be a part of this amazing space that is the Benjamin Mays Lecture. We have a wonderful evening in store for you tonight, so welcome to the Mays Lecture. At this time, I want to invite Dr. Paul Alberto, our dean, to the lectern, and he will bring greetings from the college.
Indeed, it is my pleasure for the sixth time, not quite seven, on behalf of the Georgia State University's College of Education and Human Development to welcome you to this 29th annual Benjamin Mays Lecture. This lecture series is an example of the commitment our college and our Alonzo Crim Center for Urban Educational Excellence has made to improve the education for all students across Metro Atlanta. Indeed, this commitment is embedded in the mission of our college. We prepare educators and human service professionals to make significant contributions toward the interruption of intergenerational poverty. Through our work with K-12 education and community agencies in urban settings, we apply scholarship to resolving the daily challenges children and families face due to the effects of poverty on families, schools, and communities. It is in this way that our research and outreach activities assist in moving lives forward. That is the heart and soul of what we do. We say it as often as we can, and we make sure that every student that goes through our college ends up with that as part of their DNA. The discussions engendered by these Mays lectures often carry over into the Crim Center's community programs and demonstrate how important it is to turn words into actions. We hope you leave today's lecture more engaged in our conversation about urban education and, most importantly, the communities in which we serve. It is my pleasure now to reintroduce one of the important ladies of our college, the Associate Dean for many things, including community and school partnerships, Dr. Gwen Benson.
Good evening. I bring you greetings and just a few words about this evening's occasion. Over the years, the Benjamin E. Mays Lecture has continually brought nationally prominent educators and activists to our campus to provide an important conversation on the issues facing urban school leaders and community stakeholders locally, nationally, and globally. In addition to honoring the memory of Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, this important dialogue that we've had for the past 29 years, I have 17 of those years that I've been in attendance, but it promotes Dr. Mays' philosophy of excellence in the education of those typically least well served by the larger society. As I was thinking about tonight's event, I became a little nostalgic. As I remembered some of the past speakers I've had an opportunity to interact with while here. Just to name a few, I won't name all 29, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Joyce King, Attorney Brian Stevenson, Ms. Ela Gandhi, Dr. Adelaide Stanford, Attorney Marian Wright Edelman, Dr. Jeannie Oakes, and many other prominent scholars over the last 29 years of the lecture. So tonight, we will continue that great tradition with Dr. Leslie Fenwick. Tonight's event, under the leadership of Dr. Brian Williams and our Benjamin E. Mays Chair, endowed chair holder, Dr. Joyce King, is central to the mission of the College of Education and Human Development. The annual Mays Lecture and other major initiatives implemented through the CREM Center demonstrates that through sustained partnerships and ongoing community outreach, we can contribute to educational excellence in urban schools and the communities we serve. I am confident that tonight's lecture will spark much discussion, followed by a call to activism. So thank you for joining us tonight for the annual Benjamin E. Mays Lecture, and I know we will all be inspired by our guest speaker. So now I'd like to invite Dr. Joyce King to the podium for the formal introduction of our speaker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benson and Dean Alberto and Dr. Williams. This is always a special event in my life because I invite my students and lots of people in the community come out, and I have the special honor tonight of introducing to you Dr. Leslie T. Fenwick. You have her bio in the program, but I'd like to just cover that formally because she is such an outstanding educator. Dr. Leslie Fenwick is Dean Emeritus and Professor of Educational Policy and Leadership at the Howard University School of Education, a nationally known education policy and leadership scholar, and former urban kindergarten to 12th grade teacher, and as she likes to say, effective teacher and administrator. Dr. Fenwick is co-founder of the Howard University American Association of School Administrators, Urban Superintendents Academy, and a past member of the Harvard University Principal Center Leadership, and is a member of the Scholarly Advisory Committee for the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So don't all rush to see if you can get special tickets. Her op-ed articles about education, the economy, urban development have appeared in the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Education Week, Huffington Post, and diverse issues in higher education. We can say she's an important thought leader in education, and I would say quite a courageous analyst of what is happening in urban education. Dr. Fenwick is regularly called upon to testify about educational equity, college access, and teacher quality in the U.S. Senate, and she's been an invited speaker at the National Press Club, where she discussed federal regulations affecting the nation's educator workforce. She also serves on the National Advisory Council for Edtopia, and she is a past member of the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education Board of Directors. A science enthusiast, Dr. Fenwick was appointed by NASA Administrator Charles Bolden to NASA's Education and Public Outreach Community. And I'd like to add my voice to those who have said that you're in for a special treat tonight. Dr. Fenwick.
Well, I certainly feel like I'm home. I spent 13 years here in Atlanta at Clark Atlanta University and had the occasion, and had the occasion on several times, Dean Alberto, to come to Georgia State to deliver lectures or to speak to faculty colleagues. I'm deeply grateful to you, Dr. King, and also Dr. Williams for inviting me here to deliver the Benjamin E. Mays Lecture. And as I said, Atlanta is my second home, or maybe I should say, as Dr. Williams alluded, Wakanda. I must say that I was delighted when I was going through the airport to see the T3 gate stamped with Wakanda with a flight leaving at 7:30 p.m., thanks to your new mayor. Again, I want to acknowledge my colleagues from Clark Atlanta University, where I spent 13 wonderful years as a faculty member and administrator, and I must especially call out Dr. Jim Young, who was a visiting scholar at Clark Atlanta when I arrived as a new faculty member, and he was on leave from Georgia State, and it actually was through Dr. Young that I met Dr. Asa Hilliard, who became a dear mentor and friend, and so it's a delight to see you here as well, Patsy, Mrs. Hilliard. Thank you for being here. Each year when I was at CAU, I and my students attended this lecture, and I especially recall in 1997 when my friend and mentor, Dr. Asa Hilliard, delivered the lecture. And Patsy, you'd find it interesting that since that time, now it's 2018 and that was 1997, I've kept a copy of his remarks near my computer in my home office for frequent referencing and for inspiration. I believe I'm the 5th scholar to deliver the Mays Lecture who is affiliated with an HBCU, and I'm also personally pleased that the lecture is named for Benjamin E. Mays, who prior to becoming president of Morehouse College, as you well know, was dean of the School of Divinity at Howard University. So in some ways I feel there's an affiliation here, me as a former dean and him as a former dean as well, who inspired our being together here today. I frequently say that if HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, disappeared tomorrow, and there are forces that would like us to, but we won't, so too would black academics. More than 60% of black people who earn doctorates hold faculty positions at historically black colleges and universities, and nearly 96% of black tenured faculty members are at HBCUs. And these data are especially striking when you consider that HBCUs comprise only 3% of the nation's 4,000 colleges and universities. But this evening, Dean Alberto, I don't come as a dean emeritus. I don't even come as a tenured professor. I come to you as a teacher who has successfully taught black students, many of whom were characterized as poor, from kindergarten through the doctoral level. And so in this regard, my remarks, which are titled Looking Behind the Veil of School Reform, are informed by my experiences and observations about what it takes to create teaching and learning environments that nurture all students. And I've been very mindful of the time because I appreciate you all spending your evening here, so I think my remarks are exactly 32 minutes, Dr. Williams. I've divided my comments into 2 related sections. The first explores how researchers represent blacks in research, and the second takes us behind the veil of school reform to see what's really happening to schools that serve black, brown, and poor children. Well, the hallmark of science is replication of what works. Yet too much, I believe, of the media and research commentary about black people and the black community is a litany of negativity, a recitation about what's not working. The image of black people, I believe, in contemporary research is dismal and harmful at best, and more often than not, outright defamatory and libelous. I recall an occasion nearly 18 years ago, and maybe some of you who are researchers and professors have had a similar experience. I was invited to a foundation-sponsored think tank, I won't name the foundation, but you would know it, to examine, as the invitation letter stated, and I quote, urban education and minority student outcomes. There were 20 experts in the field invited to attend. I was the one invitee who was African American. And there was one Hispanic Latinx at this convening on urban education held in the hills of Colorado. Toward the end of the first day, the discussion turned to increasing African American students' college readiness and admission rates. And as that day came to a close, one of the think tank participants stated that African American males' college admission rates were low because they performed poorly, specifically less well than African American females on college entrance exams. No one questioned this assertion, and a very lively conversation ensued about policy and funding recommendations for improving African American males' college readiness and admission rates. I recall being stunned that none of the invited scholars questioned the assumption about African American males or provided a reference, citation, or data to substantiate this claim. So that evening, I stayed up until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, searching the college, yes, I'm fanatical, searching the college boards and ETS's websites, along with volumes of the National Center for Ed Statistics Condition of Education report. And at that time, just like now, copious data were available online with test data disaggregated by race, ethnicity, gender, and geographic region, among other variables. The results of my post-midnight research indicated that African American males outscore African American females on every standardized college and professional school entrance exam. So whether you're talking about the GRE, the GMAT, the DCAT, the LSAT, the MCAT, whatever the college or graduate school professional exam, African American males outscore African American females. So the next morning, that didn't surprise me. Actually, the assertion from the night before had surprised me. So the next morning, I was very eager to present this information to the group of experts, and did so, in my mind, so that we could restructure policy and funding recommendations around accurate data. And I remember this group of experts being in disbelief about my recitation and then questioning the source and validity of the data I presented. So I reminded the group that we had not questioned nor seemed alarmed by the negative erroneous statistics cited the night before about African American males, nor had we asked any participant until this very moment with me to verify their claims with a reference and a citation. As habit would have it, I had stuffed the website printouts in my book bag, which accompanied me to the session, so I shared the charts after I reminded everybody that this was not our operating process. This experience reinforced my own observation that this consistent and constant recitation of negative statistics about Black people is deleterious to scholarly inquiry. It misdirects policy formulation and funding priorities, and is outright libelous to Black people. In fact, much of what masquerades as research about Black people is really defamation in my experience. Webster defines defamation as the communication of a statement that makes a claim, expressly stated or implied, to be factual, that may be given an individual, business, product, group, government, religion, or nation, and implies negativity and an inferior image. So I believe that there's too little mining of existing data and too few research reports that present the truth about Black people and the Black condition. And even though we are an enlightened group assembled here this evening, I want you to take a minute to consider some answers to the following 9 questions. I am a former middle school teacher, so this is a pop quiz. You don't have to write down the answers. The first 5 questions are relatable to education and schooling, and the last 4 deal with larger societal issues. And the reason I'm asking these questions is I want you to hear the questions and then think about the answers, and think if there's something counter-narrative in these answers. So the first question is, what percentage of African American parents report setting aside a special time and place for their child to complete homework and have an adult in the house check it? We have some African American parents in the room. I won't ask them to stand up and give an answer, but the answer is 94% of African American parents report engaging in this school-affirming behavior, and this is the highest percentage for any subgroup of parents responding to the Parent and Family Involvement in Education survey conducted not by Fenwick, but by the National Center for Ed Statistics at the U.S. Department of Education. What does that data tell you about parental involvement and the narrative about the disconnect between African American families and their child's participation in school? It pushes against that notion. It unconfirms that research. What percentage of Black parents and white parents report attending PTA meetings and parent-teacher conferences? And again, I'm asking this because many of us in this room, you're either working on your doctorate, you're a scholar yourself, you've read literature over the decades about school and community relations, parent-teacher relations, building school climates and environments. Well, here again, the Parent and Family Involvement in Education survey, conducted by the National Center for Ed Statistics, reports that 90% of white parents and 87% of Black parents report attending PTA meetings. 78% of white parents and 77% of Black parents report attending parent-teacher conferences. Third question, there are 9. What is the gender and racial ethnic profile of the nation's most credentialed and experienced educators? So if we disaggregated the nation's educators, primarily teachers and principals and superintendents, by number of degrees they have and years of experience, what would that fallout look like? What would that demographic fallout or profile look like? The answer is African American males. My research shows that African American educators are the nation's most credentialed and experienced group of educators. Specifically, African American males are more likely to hold a doctorate and have more years of experience as a teacher when they ascend to the principalship, and more years as a principal when they ascend to the superintendency than their white peers. In comparison, white males, who represent more than 80% of the nation's nearly 14,000 superintendents, are the least credentialed and professionally experienced educators in the nation. Number 4, are there more Black men in prison or in college? I hear prison, so I hear college. Okay. In fact, there are more Black men in college than in prison. There are approximately 1.4 million Black men in college and about 840,000 Black men in prison, too many Black men in prison. But for years, we heard this recitation, there are more Black men in prison than in college, and it's not factual. The record was corrected by our own, Howard University's own Dr. Ivory Tolson. And, we continue to hear this piece of data. If there's nothing you remember from my speech, I hope you remember to tell everyone that's within hearing distance of you that there are more Black men in college than in prison. Which group of 12th graders is least likely to use alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs? I asked some 12th graders this question. They didn't know the right answer. According to the National Institute for Drug Abuse, African American high school seniors consistently have been found to have lower estimates than white high school seniors for the prevalence of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. This finding also is true among African American youth in lower grades and African American college students attending historically Black colleges and universities. The National Institute for Drug Abuse tells us that. The next question, which population of women between the ages of 18 to 36 years of age is most likely to use illicit or prescription drugs, marijuana, or cocaine, white women or Black women? According to the Department of Health and Human Service, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Journal of Ethnicity and Substance Abuse, repeated annual reports for the last 25 years, white women use more drugs than Black women. Specifically, white women in the age group that I cited, 18 to 36, 41% of white women report using illicit or prescription drugs, compared to 24.9% of Black women. Also, 38.2% of white women report using marijuana compared to 18.7% of black women. 3% of white women report using cocaine compared to 0.7% of black women. Is that the first time you've heard those data? Yeah. Which population of men between the ages of 18 to 36 is more likely to use illicit or prescription drugs, marijuana, or cocaine, white men or black men? Again, according to the Department of Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Journal of Ethnicity and Substance Abuse, 25 years of research shows that white men use more drugs than black men. Specifically, 43% of white men report using illicit or prescription drugs compared to 36% of African American men, and 41.5% of white men report using marijuana compared to 33.5% of African American men. 5.1% of white men report using cocaine compared to 1.8% of African American men. And this leads to my last two questions. What percentage of crack cocaine usage is by whites, and what percentage of powder cocaine usage is by whites? The answers are 62% of crack cocaine usage is by whites, and 72% of powder cocaine usage is by whites. While often characterized as a drug of the black community, 60% of individuals who have ever used crack in the last month are white. White crack cocaine users also account for 66% of individuals who have ever used crack in their lifetime. Simply stated, the majority of crack users in this country are white. Despite this reality, 80% of people arrested for crack cocaine offenses are blacks at rates 10 times higher than that of whites. And then my final question, which population of Americans is most likely to attend church? I think we kind of know that. According to the annual Gallup poll of Americans' church attendance, 55% of African Americans report attending church weekly, the highest percentage for any racial or ethnic subgroup in America. Well, this recitation, I could go on with these questions. I have about 50 of them. It's not meant to be a Jeopardy game of sorts, Alex, I'll take African Americans for 600. Nor is this about advancing a strength-based or asset-based research approach. Rather, I'm urging a deep interrogation and interruption of the defamation of black people in research, and I'm urging us as scholars and policymakers and funders to peel back the layers of statistics that we hear each and every day about black boys and girls, black men and women, black families and black communities. And in fact, when I'm at Howard University speaking to my students, I tell them, we are not equipping you at Howard University to get these degrees, to act like you weren't a black child. Well, these black children and their families. We're not equipping you with degrees to speak about black children like you weren't one, or to talk about black families like you didn't come from one, or black communities like you weren't nurtured by them. Okay? I want us to be suspicious each and every time, and I mean each and every time, that we see that PowerPoint that begins with the listing of negative statistics about black people. And I want us to be nervous each and every time we report these data. I want us to make other people uncomfortable about capriciously reporting these data, and I want us to take the time to tease out as many pieces of empowering data and gather our own strategic data. I want us to approach our research when we sit down to write and when we attend our learned society meetings armed with empowering data so that we can fight this defamation. The common practice of beginning scholarly presentations about blacks with rosters of negative statistics reinforce in my mind at least three erroneous notions. One, these negative statistics become synonymous with negative human qualities, which are then attributed to the so-called true nature of black people. The persistence of negative statistics about blacks communicates that we are community beyond intervention. And three, rarely does such study lead to effective solutions. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not advocating rose-colored glasses or bartering away legitimate problems in a variety of communities, including the black community. What I am urging you is what Du Bois urged many, many, many years ago when he said, and I quote, a study of the slum takes us far, far beyond the slum. Well, let's peek behind the veil of urban school reform and see what it tells us, just as we've peeked behind the veil of data about the Black community. We know that Flint, Michigan came to national attention in 2014, and we also know that the news about Flint, Michigan is not just about Flint, Michigan. There are communities all across our nation being dangerously ignored and discarded, and most of these communities are populated by the poor, who are disproportionately Black and brown. Demographers tell us that in 28 years, I won't ask you to calculate how old you'll be, but in 28 years, the year 2044, the majority of US citizens will be people of color, primarily African American and Hispanic Latinx. I believe the year is actually 2024, but I'll go with what the demographers say, 2044. And I'm asking you this question as you think about this tremendous and first time in the US major demographic shift. What will this shift mean for American democracy and capitalism to have so many of the nation's future majority now living on the precarious edges of social, economic, and political order, all the while witnessing urban redevelopment and investment, none of it meant for them? In many ways, where we live shapes what we think about ourselves. So what do children living in poverty, witnessing police violence and murders, learning about lead-poisoned water, attending run-down schools with no air or no heat, seeing immigrants and Islam demonized in the news and popular movies, what do they come to think of themselves, their families, their neighborhoods, and the society that permits these atrocities? And what do these same children think when their neighborhood is suddenly transformed with new grocery stores and farmers markets, coffee shops, hip restaurants, and high-rise condominiums with rooftop pools and new schools that are not meant for them? And we've all seen this urban renewal. I know I have in Washington, D.C. I think you have here in Atlanta. If you haven't, let me explain how the program unfolds. It unfolds in lockstep. Locate new businesses, typically a large specialty grocery store and coffee shop. Upgrade public services and protective police patrol, build high-end condominiums and apartment buildings, raise public housing, export the urban poor residents, close schools serving the minority poor, and open newly restructured schools for the new, more affluent residents. And if you're not sure this equation is working, and I'm sure you know the places in Atlanta to go to see this, you can come to Washington, D.C., and go to the corner of 4th and M Street Southwest, where blocks of new development circle Syfax Homes, the area's remaining public housing project. And from Syfax, you can walk past $500,000 and $1 million condos, a completely upgraded large grocery store which contains a new coffee shop with a fireplace, boutique burger joints, and pet shops. The remarkable transformation of the grocery store alone, from poorly lit and sparsely stocked when it was primarily used by poor people and people of color, to a sparkling superstore with freshly baked breads and aisles of fruits and vegetables, mostly organic, for the new urban residents, is a story in and of itself. So what does all of this have to do with urban school reform? Urban school reform, in my opinion, is not about schools, it's not about reform, it's not about kids. It's about land development. The authors of an intriguing book, The Color of School Reform, affirm this in their study of school reform in Baltimore, Detroit, and Atlanta. And they found, and I quote, many key figures promoting broad efficiency reform initiatives for urban schools either lived in the suburbs or sent their children to private schools. We know that local control of public schools through elected school boards is supposed to empower parents and community residents, but this rarely happens in school districts serving Blacks and poor students. Too often, predators eager to exploit schools for their own benefit short-circuit the work of deep and lasting school and community uplift. Mayoral control, Teach for America, education management organizations, and venture capital-funded charter schools have not garnered much grassroots support or enthusiasm among parents whose children actually attend urban schools because these parents rightly view these schemes as uninformed by their community and disconnected from the best interest of their children. In the most recent cases of Washington, D.C. and Chicago public schools, Black parents and other community members point to school closings as verification for their distrust of school reform efforts. We know that mayoral control has been linked to a pattern of closing and disinvesting in schools that serve poor Black students and reopening them as charters operated by education management organizations and backed by venture capitalists. While mayoral control proposes to expand educational opportunities for Black and poor children, more often than not, new schools are placed in upper-income, gentrifying white areas of town, while more schools are closed and fewer new schools are opened in low-income Black areas, thus increasing the level of education inequity. Inner-city residents are suspicious of school reform, particularly when it's attached to neighborhood revitalization, which they view as an imposition from external moneyed elites who are exclusively committed to using schools to recalculate urban land values at the expense of inner-city children, parents, and communities. Make no mistake about it. The nation is still fighting for Brown, but not in the Supreme Court this time. We're now fighting for Brown on Wall Street. The moral imperative to support deep and lasting change in urban communities and reclaim public education will not be driven by mayoral control. It will not be driven by union-busting, anti-teacher displacing Teach for America, which populates schools serving Black, brown, and poor children with sociology and anthropology and geography majors masquerading as teachers. And while Teach for America participants, I don't say teachers, I was trained as a professional teacher, so while Teach for America participants have a missionary zeal to serve, the NAACP and the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, MALDEF, affirm that the missionary model has never been a friend of Black people, brown people, colored people worldwide. And if you don't believe me or the NAACP or MALDEF, read the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, which affirmed that saddling minority poor children with uncertified teachers, and I'm quoting from the decision, is discriminatory and does harm to students. Urban school reform will not be delivered to us by the Broad Foundation program. With its declare failure, then close schools in poor Black neighborhoods, turn schools over to the governor and emergency management team programmed superintendents. If there's one near you, expect school closures in Black neighborhoods. There's one near me. There have been 3 near me. Is there one near you? It won't be driven by other deep-pocketed venture capital-backed philanthropists who think that they know best and push their ideals alone. You know the names, name them. The nation needs louder interrogation of the hand of modern-day philanthropists in public education. The P in public education stands for public, not philanthropically supported. We need louder interrogation and interruption of their motives and endgame. Think about this. The most prominent billionaires who are underwriting urban school reform are a remarkably undiverse group. They do, however, find diverse acolyte pawns, program them, provide them all the money to start charter school networks and infiltrate public school districts. Note, back at home, these billionaires' companies' leadership is not diverse, and in most cases, their workforce is not diverse or unionized, and yet they fund quick-draw school startups, which can instantly create a public relations campaign using the faces of Black, brown, and poor children and tear-jerking mission statements about their uplift, and yet these same billionaires can't diversify their company's leadership and workforce or create jobs that benefit the communities captured in cycles of poverty and neglect. Why is this so? Why can't they create jobs with their billions? There's more than 50 years of research indicating that concerted efforts to provide female heads of household meaningful employment opportunities would prevent hundreds of thousands of families from falling into intractable poverty. Once families experience intractable poverty, their children are dramatically worse off in terms of quality school options and the likelihood of high academic achievement. When we hear about venture capital-backed charter school networks, when those sneak into our system, I believe we must ask ourselves, why do we want to believe that corporate America, which is not a friend to Black adults, will rescue Black children out of poor-performing schools, job deserts, and school deserts? And why are these venture capital-backed charter school networks, with their highly programmed curricula through their no excuses schools, infiltrating the education of Black, brown, and poor children? This is when you sit, Black child. This is when you stand, brown child. This is when you look the uncertified Teach for America participant teacher, so-called teacher in the eye, poor child. This is how you pass the standardized test. Oh no, not you, special needs child. We don't accommodate the differently abled. This is when you become a thought-controlled, submissive worker in the machine. Here's your slot, and by the way, it's not in my company. But when do you, Black child, brown child, become educated, have teachers who believe in your intellectual capacity and nascent genius? When do you, Black child, brown child, poor child, have time for curiosity, exploration, and play, which Einstein said is the highest form of learning? When do you have time to heal from the violence that shapes contemporary poverty? When do you, Black child, brown child, poor child, have time to flourish in a contemplative and in a nurturing school? In a school that is not programming you not to think. Cuando? When? We cannot continue to abandon children in school and job deserts and expect them to fulfill their destinies or our nation to live up to its democratic promise. So this glance behind the veil of urban school reform reveals the strategy. And this is the strategy. It's an easy strategy. Use the truth to tell a lie. So the truth centers on the shock and awe strategy that public schools are failing. And it's true that public schools have and are underserving Black children and those living in poverty. The lie is that venture-backed charter schools, no excuses schools, vouchers, Broad-prepared superintendents, Teach for America are the answer. But what's the real end game of those with the money and much of the power once they bust the teachers' unions, capture the near trillion, $650 billion supporting public schools, $650 billion supporting public schools? What's their goal once they reduce public space? I believe it's to control thought, not in an X-Files kind of way. I haven't gone off that way. But to control thought, eliminate authentic, conscious Black school leadership, replace those leaders with individuals who are program controlled and not at all beholden to Black, brown, and poor communities. Rather, they are scripted and controlled by their promoters, whose interests are often contrary to the families whose children are in the public school districts they lead. So how do we build the community of believers that Dr. Krim spoke about, that Dr. Mays alluded to? I think they both would ask us, where are those people? Are we those people who really believe in and are willing to invest in Black, brown, and poor children? I believe we must look to ourselves and we must ask the right questions to guide our thinking and our collective action. And here are 4 questions that I believe are essential. What firm is conducting your superintendent search or your last superintendent search? Is your superintendent a graduate of the Broad Preparation Program? If so, expect school closings in the Black neighborhood near you and proliferation of charters with district money. Parents and community leaders, I believe, must demand a fair and open search process to produce superintendent candidates who have excellent education credentials, successful and substantial teaching, principal, and superintendent tenures and instructional expertise, not biographies that are created when they assume these positions. We should not have novices leading urban school districts. We need proven leadership. This issue hit close to home for me. In DC, our last superintendent search was led by a search firm that had never conducted a superintendent search, ever. You don't have to know a lot about education policy to see the fix was in. Also, communities must rise and fight, I believe, when principals and superintendents who have served our communities well are demonized. We must take a "you'll not mess with this one" attitude if we are to attract and retain the best principals and superintendents for urban districts. The second question I think we need to consider is, why are we reading about the jailing of Black superintendents, principals, and teachers? Now, I am a former K-12 teacher. I began teaching 4th grade, taught in middle school, was an assistant principal and a principal, and then moved to higher ed. So I don't want anyone to construe this as I'm saying cheat. I think the tests are a cheat, but I'm not saying cheat, okay? But why are we reading about the jailing of Black superintendents, principals, and teachers? When did creating a, quote, culture of fear about test scores become racketeering, a crime punishable by 20 years in prison? Why aren't state legislators who created high-stakes test states under the same scrutiny as superintendents when standardized test score irregularities are found? After all, didn't these governors and legislators pass the laws that tie student test scores to educators' compensation against the advice of education researchers, parents, teachers' unions, and superintendents' organizations? Why was the former DC Public Schools Chancellor Michelle Rhee, who was accused of creating the very same culture of fear about test scores, why is she glorified and placed on the cover of Time magazine while former Atlanta Superintendent Beverly Hall was charged with racketeering? Why does Rhee continue to enjoy bipartisan support from the so-called conservative and education reformers? Is it really about cheating on the test? And who named the test the god of education and assessment? We know from decades of research that test-driven systems don't incentivize improvement, and they hurt minority and high-poverty schools, often leaving these schools dramatically worse off. And this is so because in high-poverty schools, students are 70% more likely than their affluent peers to have a teacher teaching them 4 subjects, math, English, social studies, and science, who's not certified in any of those subjects and doesn't have a college major or minor in the subject taught. So if we were a school and half of us were on free or reduced lunch, the teacher in front of you in 4 subject areas, math, go across the hall, for science, go down the hall for English and social studies, you are 70% more likely to have a teacher who's not certified in the area he or she is teaching you and doesn't have a college major or minor. And so why have we allowed the academic requirements for children to increase and access through the door of teaching to decrease? Continuing to educationally malnourish children will not yield much progress. Not surprisingly, until we change the inputs, we will continue to find that students without adequate teachers will come up short. And in fact, I think we need to be apprised of one statistic that I find a bit jarring. 84% of Black children are in high-stakes test states, meaning they're in states where you are required to take a standardized test to progress to the next level or next grade or graduate, compared to 66% of white children. The last two questions I think we need to ask, in 2015, the nation's public school population became majority students of color for the first time in the history of public schools in this country. With this level of diversity, why are textbooks and other instructional materials almost exclusively white in content and authorship? I want you to couple this observation with this fact. Nearly 60% of Blacks who earn doctorates earn the degree in education, mostly in the subspecialty of curriculum and instruction. Certainly, the textbook companies could use these experts to expand textbook authorship and content to be more diverse and reflective of Black and Hispanic Latinx history, culture, and intellectual achievements. All children benefit when their learning materials broadly reflect the intellectual achievements, culture, and history of diverse groups. And today's teachers have a ready partner in teaching African American history and culture. The new Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture stands ready to greet the nation's teachers and children. I believe that all teachers should visit the museum with their students and take advantage as well of the digital resources available only a click away on a computer. And then finally, why do some schools in the same district have more of everything? Now, we've all read Jonathan Kozol's Savage Inequalities. We're familiar with state funding formula. It's not a sexy topic, but how we fund schools in the United States. And even though we have explicit conversation about educational equity, we still have some schools in the same district with everything. And I want you to take a ride around Atlanta Public Schools. You could do the same thing in DC or any other school district across the country. And I'm asking if you've ever visited Sarah Smith Elementary School on Roswell Road. It's a public school in Atlanta Public Schools. It's a gorgeous, high-achieving school in Northwest Atlanta with an active parent organization and financially robust foundation. Anyone teach at a school with a foundation? That supports school programs and activities. Sarah Smith, I believe, is a model school with a dedicated faculty and a staff striving to be the best each and every day as they serve their deserving students. Here's my question. Is there any one school in Southwest Atlanta like Sarah Smith? Is there one in Bankhead? Okay. Is funding for schools equal and equitable across the district? If not, why? Where is the money going? To whom is the money going? Is all the difference in booster clubs and parent-teacher associations? Or is there some other equation in action? There are many, many other critical questions that we can ask as community members committed to doing better by Black, brown, and poor children. My hope is that by sharing these facts, by peeking behind the veil of urban school reform, and sharing with you 4 essential questions, that we and our leaders will stay on the path to creating better schools and communities for all children. I believe that the economic well-being of the nation's citizens and the vibrancy of our cities and schools must be inspired by our collective will to eradicate the isolation and ills of poverty. Children are watching and learning from us, and the Black, brown, and poor children will soon comprise the majority of American citizens. Thank you for affording me this opportunity to share my thinking. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so we do Q&A, kind of conversation style. First, I want to thank Dr. Fenwick once again. Can we give her another round of applause, please? So the way we do our Q&A is Dr. King and Dr. Fenwick kind of had a conversation. You have note cards in your programs. If you have a question, please write it on the note card. I'm sorry, something's in my eye. Please write it on the note card, and one of our interns or our AmeriCorps members will come by and grab it, and we'll bring it up to Joyce. She'll read the question to Dr. Fenwick. She'll read your question to Dr. Fenwick. So we'll go ahead. Joyce will get us started, and then if you have a note card with a question, just wave it in the air. We'll come by and pick it up for you.
Let's give Dr. Fenwick another thank you, show our appreciation. While we're waiting for your questions to come up, I would just like to ask Dr. Fenwick, have you gotten any hate mail?
I've not got. Is this on? Hello? Can you hear me? Yes? I've not gotten any hate mail, but every time I do an op-ed, I'll have someone call me. From Teach for America, probably now Broad. But usually they're scholars, and they want my resources. And I always cite my resources. So they're usually trying to disconfirm the data that I'm sharing. And I tell them that I'm not going to do my research for them, but they're certainly welcome to cite my published research, which has gone through some review. But I've not gotten any hate mail.
That was a little facetious question, but we have lots of graduate students here, people looking to go into the academy and do research, and we try to encourage them, as you did in your remarks, to speak truth to this situation. What would be your advice for an emerging scholar to contribute to the solution-oriented work that you're doing?
What inspired me in looking at these data was that I found myself repeatedly in rooms where people were talking about urban education, and no one had done that work. And it disturbed me that I had taught and been an administrator and worked with students, as I said earlier, from kindergarten through the doctoral level. And I knew what was being proposed, whether it was a policy formulation, a practitioner intervention, or a funding stream, was ill-conceived and based on erroneous information, and in fact, misperceptions of Black, brown, and poor children. That angered me, and it forced me to then look for data that was disconfirming of the major narrative, of the majority narrative, mainly because I wanted people to know the truth, or I wanted people to have some tension about what was being shared with them as they formulated policy and practitioner interventions and funding streams. So my advice to doctoral students is you have a passion about some area of inquiry, and it's your passion. No one told me to stay up and question whether African American male college attendees outscored African American female prospective college attendees on the SAT, GRE, all these tests. I did that, and it was energized by my passion and my desire to know. And the same is true for you. I really enjoyed talking to the doctoral students in a symposium earlier today, and you each have unique and important passions that will drive your research. And I would say don't disconnect who you are from your research. Your life story, your story as a practitioner, informs your research. It energizes your research. It gives validity to your research. Don't set aside who you are to be an academic or a researcher. This is one of the reasons why I said earlier that I tell our students at Howard University, don't get these degrees and then start talking about communities like you're not from them. Don't take on this posture of a researcher, of a scholar, of an academic, and divorce yourself from what you know to be true. If you were a black child and someone's talking about black children in schooling, please don't adopt that posture. That, well, you know, these black children, or you know, these Hispanic Latinos, you know. You know. At Howard, we have a chant, H-U, and you know. That's the response, okay? So I'm encouraging you, I'm urging you to unpack these statistics. Get nervous when you hear these statistics, which are more often than not shared around communities of color, shared about communities of color. In many ways, communities of color have had a social science done unto us. Social science hasn't enabled our community. And I think the new generation of academics, researchers, scholars, you're going to undo some of this, and you're going to chart new courses in a world that's not replete with kind of some of the binary understandings that we've always had, black, white, gay, straight. They're not, these new scholars are in a world that's not as binary, I think, or would like to hope.
Conda. Thank you. I gotta take my glasses off for this one. What plans do you have to publish and promote this information to educational and policy administrators to improve schools?
So there are 3 publications already out. Blacks in Research, How Shall We Be Portrayed, which is a spin on a question that Du Bois raised in the Crisis in 1940. That's in the journal Urban Education. It's in print. You can pull it up, the Journal of Urban Education, published by SAGE. Blacks in Research, How Shall We Be Portrayed? There's an op-ed in the Washington Post titled Urban School Reform is about land development, not kids, published by the Washington Post. If you Google my name in Washington Post, it'll pop up. There's a commentary piece in Education Week titled Upending Stereotypes About Black Students in Education Week on the commentary page. And one of the reasons why I've tried to get some of these pieces in scholarly journals is for all the obvious reasons to get to researchers, but I've put these opinion pieces and commentary pieces together for the Washington Post and Education Week and other publications, Phi Delta Kappan, to get the word to practitioners. My latest piece is vouchers. It's actually titled Vouchers. Really? Again? And I was asked to write the piece after Joshua Starr, Dr. Starr, who's the president of PDK, heard me speak at the press club. And so that piece is in PDK, Phi Delta Kappan.
Mm-hmm. How have you seen ALEC affect urban schools and education legislation? This is the legislative group that writes legislation, model legislation for people in Congress, ALEC.
How have I seen them affect?
Mm-hmm. Or have you?
I don't know that I know ALEC. I'd have to have some other context.
Okay, we'll come back to that. I am a white, upper middle class, private school educated young woman. What can I do knowing that I don't want to dictate what is best for a community I am not of?
It's a wonderful question. And I heard that question about a month ago. A large group of parents who were from predominantly white, affluent district attended a symposium about vouchers in charter schools, and they were there to say that we want to support this cause of reducing the number of vouchers and charter school proliferation, and what can we do? And I really appreciated that question. Well, I don't think in the United States that there are any coalitions that are progressive coalitions that don't have a variety of people. So when you look at the American tradition and the democratic tradition, we've succeeded, whether we're talking about civil rights, multicultural education, Afrocentric education, we've succeeded because we've had pluralistic and progressive groups of people come together. We've not had groups of people who've come together in isolation. The Great American Experiment says that when we come together, and I do think that this was the model of Dr. Benjamin Umays and Dr. Alonzo Krim, those men collaborated, and even during the social era that they grew up in and were professionals during, they saw all kinds of social and racial atrocities that we've not experienced, many of us in this room. And yet they continued a belief in the democratic ideal that energizes America. And so I think that more coalitions of diverse people are needed. We need the parent who has a child at Sarah Smith School. We need the parent who doesn't have a child at Sarah Smith School, who's in Bankhead. We need everybody to have a sensibility about public education, because we still express a belief that an educated citizenry is essential to the democratic experiment.
As a lowly teacher who observes district inequity at my school, what is the best way to fight for equal technology, funding, facilities, etc.?
None of us can do this work alone. We all need coalitions, and there's no such thing as a lowly teacher. I began my career as a fourth grade teacher. There's no such thing as a lowly teacher. After parents, these are the individuals who cultivate and nurture our children. But I do think that we all need support, whether we're a researcher. You know, when I do my research, I think about Dr. King. I think about Dr. Vanessa Seidel-Walker. I use the work of James D. Anderson. These people's research energizes me. It keeps me focused on my path. And I think that teachers need coalitions, researchers need coalitions, superintendents. We need coalitions of each other and other people. And I think when you build those coalitions, you have the answers for your coalition. So teachers have an answer for their own coalition of teachers. So I would say we're not doing the work in isolation, and there are many others who are doing this work. And when you start down the path, it will unfold before you.
I have two questions about the preparation of teachers. How do we enhance teacher preparation programs so that they are inclusive with respect to gender, race, sexuality, socioeconomic status? Is there some gray space when we're talking about TFA and charter schools?
There's no gray space when we're talking about TFA and charter schools. There isn't. And I say that based on my experience as an educator. I don't believe there's any gray space. No. The intention of the program is not to assist Black, brown, and poor children. It's not, as Lyndon Johnson said, to use education to lift children, those who are in poverty, out of poverty. So no, I don't think there's any gray space. And that made me forget the first part of the question.
What's your advice for teacher educators who prepare teachers to work in urban schools of historically underserved students?
I really see these models. I referenced the $650 billion industry that's public school education. I'm not answering the first part of the question. I realize this. I'm stuck on the second part of the question about the gray space. I see these models as harmful, not harmful as a theoretical proposition, as someone who's not worked in schools and helped Black, brown, and poor children achieve academically. I see them as harmful and disruptive to the notion and ideal of public education. I also see these models as tied to revenue generation for venture capitalists and those who would run charter networks. So the reason I come down so hard on this is I don't think the models were designed with children in mind. And if you start there, that's the beginning and the end of the conversation. Additionally, when you think about charters and vouchers, I want you to go back to the history. The history of charters and vouchers did not start in 1983 with a nation at risk. Charters and vouchers started post-1954, post-Brown, with white resistance to desegregation in the 16 dual-system states. Southern legislators, superintendents, and teachers, white teachers, superintendents, and legislators said, how can we continue to resist what was then the law of the land? And came up with the schemes of charters and vouchers to do so. So this is in a stream, these heavy laden tools that are intended to redirect that $650 billion away from the nation's largest socializing organization called public schools, right at a time when Black, brown, and poor children become the majority. That's not conspiratorial, that's historical fact. So we have to interrogate these tools in light of their history. So no, there's no gray space on a racist tool called charters and vouchers now rescuing Black, brown, and poor children out of poverty and out of school deserts. No, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, MALDAF, and NAACP, which are instruments of justice in this country, said those models are discriminatory and do harm to children. That's what the judges of the Ninth Circuit Court said. So there's no gray space. There's a lot that we can do, I think, in teacher education. And I think I wish we focused more on diversifying the authorship and content of textbooks and other instructional materials. Now, teacher ed can't do that job, but future teachers can. That lowly teacher that's not lowly, she can connect online with the National Museum of African American History and Culture and use their digital archives if she doesn't know about African American history. I can connect with the National Museum of Native American History and use their digital archives in my classroom.
Here are two other sort of related questions. Do you know what the demographic profile of TFA participants / missionaries is? Why do you think the profile looks that way? And what do you think the solution is to meet the growing deficit of qualified teachers?
So if we go inside inner city rings and look at teacher demographics, 73% of inner city teachers are white and 68% of inner city principals are white. Come out of that inner city ring to urban centers, 91% of teachers are white. Now you already know the demographic profile of students in this country. The majority of public school students are African American, Hispanic, Latino, and the majority of public school students are also living in poverty. So there's this huge demographic mismatch between public school personnel and the students that they're serving. Now we mention this because all students benefit from having diverse models of intellectual authority before them. Whether they're white, Black, Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, all students benefit by having diverse models of intellectual authority. And we know for Black and Hispanic Latino students that there are social and academic benefits that accrue to those students when they're in schools that are diversely staffed. So when Black and Hispanic Latinx students are in highly diversely staffed schools, there are 4 outcomes. They're less likely to be placed in special ed, more likely to be tested for gifted education, more likely to graduate high school in 4 years, less likely to be expelled or suspended. So we know that there are benefits that accrue to children when they're in diversely staffed schools. The demographic profile of Teach for America teachers I think is somewhat similar to the national profile of teachers. About 80% of our teachers in this country are white females. And so we still have work to do. I'm not demonizing, I'm not here to demonize, nor would I, white female teachers. I think anyone who goes into the career of teaching wants to serve his or her students well and views teaching as a calling. But we do have more work as a nation to do in diversifying the teaching force. Only about 8% of our teachers are African American nationwide. Only about 6 to 8% are Hispanic. 11% of the nation's 93,000 principals are African American, and less than 3% of the nation's 14,000 superintendents are African American. So we still have a lot of work to do, and that history of underrepresentation of African Americans in particular is tied to the history of the desegregation of schools.
I am an elementary teacher at a public charter in DeKalb. I'm planning to leave the classroom after 4 years. I'm completely disenchanted with the institution of education. What advice would you give to me and other teachers like me?
I think that contemporary teachers are under a lot of stress. Most of that stress is related to standardized testing and other mandates that are centrally kind of construed and communicated. Again, I go back to this idea that teachers need communities of support like any other professional. And it saddens me to know that someone's going to leave the classroom because of disenchantment. I wonder if they would consider going to another school, taking their expertise and becoming a principal so that they could craft the kind of environment that would be the contemplative, nurturing environment that we hope for. I think one message that I have is I'd like to see researchers and teachers and all groups of educators in communities of care that support them as they engage their research and do their practice so that they don't become isolated and inert. Coalitions can exercise pressure that individuals sometimes cannot.
You spoke about the negative data and misrepresentation in research. How does one go about finding credible sources for accurate information?
The accurate information that I cited, I had to find on my own, usually in the middle of the night. It seems to be between midnight and 3 a.m. are the best times to do research, unless you're married. That doesn't work very well. But if you're single, it might work. The data, you'll have to find it yourself because it's counter-narrative and it won't be presented to you. And you'll have to look at those charts yourself, not the narrative beneath the chart. And you'll spend a lot of time being challenged about what you present. And so for years, I don't do it anymore. I think when I became a dean, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. But I used to carry the charts with me and project them onto screen so people could see what I was talking about. Because I knew it was counter-narrative. I knew they hadn't heard it. I knew they had heard just the opposite. And people would be stunned when they confused, like, well, how? Well, why? And then out of that misinformation, you have cannons of research built on improving Black parental involvement. And yet the data don't seem to show that the problem lies where we've been taught to believe the problem is. So you will have to find it for yourself. And as researchers build these counter-narrative research studies, we'll be able to cite one another. But it's not out there enough right now. The raw data is there, but no one's reporting on it.
So we have time for just maybe two more, and these are unrelated, but I'll ask them both, and maybe you can figure out a way to put them together. You alluded to the importance of play and fun in education. Please expand on your thoughts about the role of play and fun, and I want to personally thank you for your thought-provoking speech. How can we create a pipeline of minority educators? Maybe having fun.
Yeah, maybe that's the way to do it. You know, I often say that, you know, we need HBCUs in this conversation. And we desperately need HBCUs in this conversation. Today, 2018, nearly 2 decades into a new millennium, HBCUs still prepare 50% of the nation's Black teachers. So if we're thinking about diversifying the teaching force and we don't include HBCUs, we're not authentic about what we're trying to achieve. So the first thing I would say is any partnerships with HBCUs or any recognition of HBCUs' work will be helpful to this national goal. And that's related a bit to the STEM conversation too. If we want to increase, and all teachers now talk about STEM, if we want to increase the number of minorities in STEM fields, the number of students of color in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, we're going to have to engage HBCUs there as well. Because when you look across the country at the 4,000 colleges and universities, the top 10, 6 of the top 10 producers of STEM bachelor's degrees to African Americans and STEM PhDs are HBCUs, okay? So the #1 producer of African American engineers, my nephew in the front row, he can stand up, Jabari Aku. I'm really proud of him. My nephew was just accepted to North Carolina A&T, which is the #1 producer of African American engineers. And Dr. King and I were telling him, you know, and forgive me, English majors, it's one thing to be accepted as an English major, but to be accepted as an engineering student, that's pretty awesome. But 6 of the 10, so if we said, who are the top 10 awardees of bachelor's and doctoral degrees to African Americans in the STEM fields, it's not Georgia Tech, though we love Georgia Tech, it's not MIT, Caltech, Rensselaer, it's North Carolina A&T that holds the national record. If we ask who's the #1 producer of on-campus PhDs to Blacks in the STEM fields, it's Howard University. It's not, yay. So these institutions have to be part of the conversation and lead the conversation on diversifying the nation's teaching force and diversifying our STEM workforce. We're not producing the most number of STEM bachelor's and doctoral recipients or Black teachers just because we're Black. There's an intellectual model that's operating. There's a preparation model that has an ethos and an ethic. There's something that we can extract to the larger problem that besets our country.
Thank you, Dr. Fenwick.
Thank you.
So thank you, Joyce, and Dr. Fenwick, Dr. King, and Dr. Fenwick. We have one last thing we need to do tonight, and it's a gift for you, Dr. Fenwick, from Georgia State University and the Mays Lecture Committee. But historically, yeah, if you come up to the lectern, historically, we've asked Dr. Krim's family to present this award. So at this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Timothy Krim to come to the lectern to present the award.
I just want to share a couple of statements and just say how honored and humble I am to be here, and to just thank you, Dr. Fenwick, for that very enlightened vision and empowering lecture and this call to action. Just give her another hand, please. The whole idea of looking behind the veil of school reform. But I just wanted to share, I had the opportunity to know Dr. Mays, Dr. King, and to speak with him. And this resulted from time to time with me driving him home after the board meetings of the Atlanta Public Schools. And so I had an opportunity to talk with him and just really kind of look at some of the words. And Dr. Fenwick, you have really inspired some of those words from Dr. Mays that informs us that we today stand on the shoulders of our predecessors who have gone before us. We, as their successors, must catch the torch of freedom and the torch of liberty passed on to us by our ancestors. And we cannot lose this battle. And so, again, thank you. And on behalf of the Alonzo A. Krim Center for Urban Educational Excellence at Georgia State, Dean Alberto, Dr. Benson, Dr. Williams, and Dr. King, and the center whose mission it is to optimize the life opportunities of children and families in urban communities by ensuring the availability of a prosperous and equitable school environment through community engagement, research, and educational development and support. So we'd like to present you with this recognition as the 29th Benjamin Mays Lecturer.
I think I've said everything that needed to be said. But I do have one thought listening to you, that these men, Dr. Mays, Dr. Krim, and I also think of Mordecai Wyatt Johnson, Howard University's first African-American president. They spoke with power and truth and conviction about very difficult, racially charged topics at a time when they could have been lynched. And if you hear Mordecai Wyatt Johnson in one of those old tapes, or you hear Dr. Mays, or you hear Dr. Krim, they're speaking when things could have happened to them that were really bad, just walking out onto the street. And we don't have that pressure before us. So I'm hopeful that we seek the truth, speak the truth, and build coalitions that are diverse and pluralistic around the truth. And to me, that's the great hope of this center that Dr. Williams so eloquently and elegantly leads. Thanks.
This concludes this year's Mays Lecture. I'm going to ask that you pay attention to the back of your program. The Sources Conference will be the next time we see you all. We hope to see you at Sources in October of 2018. We hope that you've enjoyed the evening. I hope that you've been fed, and I hope to see you at Sources. Thank you very much for coming out.